Have you ever heard the story of the three little pigs? I'm not going to tell that story to you. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, though, tell a story about some pigs. But it's not one that you want to tell the kids at bedtime. We're going to look at Mark's version of the pigs in the far-off country. The far-off country that is really not that far from the place Jesus spent 80 to 90% of his ministry time. It's this place on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee, the region of the Gerasenes. It's not a town called Gerasene, it is the region of. It's several little small villages, all making up the area of Hippus, or one of the 10 cities of the Decapolis. What is the Decapolis? It's an interesting collection of 10 cities. Standing on top of Mount Arbel in the Galilee, where Jesus gave the Great Commission and the Beatitudes, I'm looking down in this picture on to Capernaum, Bethsaida, and Chorazin to the left of that picture. But then over there you can see the arrow pointing to the city on a hill called Hippus, one of the 10, which is where we get Decapolis, Deca in Latin. One of the 10 cities, but the city on the hill that Jesus would have been looking over at when his disciples were being taught. This is a city that was run by the Greeks, run by Rome, but predominated by Greek culture. It had theaters. It had the Decapolis had their own army. They had their own coinage. They were a city with theaters and gymnasiums and all sorts of things, lots of lights, lots of dazzle, always urging and bidding people, come, adopt the Roman way, come be like us. This city on a hill was the far-off country. When Jesus tells the story of the prodigal son, he went to bed every night looking at that city, the glow of the lights. And if you could stand on the shore of the Sea of Galilee with me as the sun goes down, whether you're standing over in the city of Tiberias, which basically just comes right down to the shore of the Sea of Galilee, or if you're standing over on the eastern side, where we're going to be today, looking at Tiberias, you'll notice that any light is even more greatly enhanced by the reflection off the water of the Sea of Galilee. So at night when the lights went off in Hippus, it was a beacon bidding people come adopt the lifestyle of pleasure. And it's here in this area that Jesus goes to. Jews don't go to the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee. They're Gentiles. And they're Gentiles who are Greeks. And a lot of folklore and even the Talmud, which is the collection of writings of the sages of Israel, said that the remnants of the 7 nations of Canaanites live there. They believed that they were the people who were God's most hated enemies. They were involved in child sacrifice. They ate swine. They sacrificed them to Baal. These were the worst of the worst. You don't go to the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee. So we got there with our last trip and we climbed aboard a boat on the eastern side to go over to the western side. And the name of our boat, the Hippus, which is the city on a hill, Hippus. So before I show you the rest of the pictures, let's take a look at Mark chapter 5 and the story of demoniacs and pigs and the power of God. Chapter 5 of Mark, if you don't have a Bible, there are free Bibles below you, beneath you, beside you. We would love for you to read along with us. Chapter 5, verse 1 is where we're going to be reading. The story is told not just by Mark, but Matthew and Luke as well. Matthew and Luke mention 2 demoniacs. Mark is going to mention 1. I'll tell you why I think that is in a moment. Chapter 5 of Mark, verse 1, so they, Jesus and his disciples, were in a boat. They arrived on the other side of the lake. That means the wrong side, the other side. In the region of the Gerasenes. Then Jesus climbed out of the boat. A man possessed by an evil spirit came from the cemetery to meet him. This man lived among the burial caves and could no longer be restrained even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him and ran to meet him and bowed low before him. With a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." Isn't it interesting that Satan invokes the name of God? Wow. For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of that man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" He wasn't talking to the man. He was talking to the demonic spirit. And he replied, "My name is Legion," which is a Roman garrison of many soldiers, perhaps 100. It could be that there's 100 demons living in this man, because there are many of us inside this man. Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. In other words, the abyss. In other words, don't send us back to the abyss. We can't get out of there. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. The herdsmen fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. And he was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. Then those who had seen what happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him, but Jesus said, "No. Go home to your family, tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been." So the man started off to visit the 10 towns, the Decapolis of that region, and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed at what he told them. Let's stop reading right there. The Decapolis, these 10 cities of Roman origin, run by the Greeks, enemies of the Jews. There was great hatred in the first century between the city of Hippas and the Jews. The Jews tried to influence Hippas because they saw that as really kind of part of the promised land. But the more they tried to invoke their Jewish rules on them, the more they became boisterous in their flaunting of their freedom. They were obsessed with all sorts of humanism, really, is the best way to way to say it. So as you stand there on this place in the region of the Gerasenes, you see this area here that many archaeologists have studied this area and have come to the conclusion that this is probably most likely the place in which this event took place. Now, today, the Sea of Galilee is much lower than it was in the first century. Today, even the Jordan River that feeds this and the Dead Sea, actually, Israel just recently in the news made a contract with the country of Jordan to begin pumping water in from the Gulf of Aqaba into the Dead Sea, because they're all concerned about the water that is decreasing quickly. So you've got to picture the water coming up much closer here to the cliff area, and this is perhaps a better picture of that, and even closer. So what was going on here? This area, the excavations that have taken place here in a particular area called Kursi, which is the Gerasene area, they found a Byzantine church where the monks venerated this place as the place in which this event took place. Early in about 300, they were doing that. And so we have this place that was once turned over to the Greeks from Alexander the Great, and then in 65 BC, when Rome took it over, it was dominated by this Greek culture. Very few Jews lived in that area, and if they did, they were not religious Jews. And Hippus sat on the top of this mountain. Pigs were not only worshipped, pigs were sacrificed. The boar head was one of their symbols. And this place was the far-off country. You know, I was reading this week some information on that area, and it's interesting to note that this area glorified sexuality, violence, wealth, the human form, and the view that only what the human mind can understand and formulate can possibly be true. It doesn't sound a whole lot different than today. And this was the place that was begging people, come, adopt our lifestyle. Jews generally, the Pharisees, just made up rules so that when you had those prodigal sons that went off to the far-off country, you just sort of let them go. You can't get them back. But let's build a lot of rules, so we build fences around the rest of our kids so they don't go off to that country. Because you know, once they go there, they're kind of a lost cause. They bought into the system. We move them into little towns like Nazareth where we're protected from the world. And you would think that Jesus would not go there. You'd think that he especially would not take a bunch of young disciples there. But instead, the light pierces the darkness. He went right into the heart of it. And he went there to rescue the lost. So we have this story going on about the demons. We talked about this a little bit last week, and that when you know the name of something, you have power over it. It's interesting, Jesus asks the name of the demon and then casts it out. There's something about that that's true, though. And you know how I've learned that? I've learned that through the process of recovery. I first learned it when I was a pastor in San Francisco. And I was being a good pastor. I went with one of my parishioners to an AA meeting. I'd like to tell you that I always just remained objective, but it became very subjective very quickly for me because they began to say things that got a little too close to home for me. And it opened the door to 2.5 years of, they're difficult 2.5 years for me. And one of the things I learned in that process was this, that once you name the demon, you take power over it. If I keep avoiding the fact that I've got this issue, I've got this problem, even when people who love me suggest that I might have this issue, I keep denying it. It continues to have power in my life. But the moment I look it square in the eyes and call it by name, I own it. And I begin to take control over it, as then I ask God at that point, Lord, I need some help because we're taking this sucker down. Jesus teaches us that. But there's a lot of demons that destroy people's lives. There are a lot of isms, addictions, dysfunction, sexual sins. If I keep running away saying, I don't have a problem, it will continue to have power over me. But when I nail it and call it for what it is, I begin to take power over it. And so here Jesus is. This man comes to him. Notice it resists Jesus, but it cannot come against Jesus. It may try to beg Jesus to leave, but it cannot come up against him. Sometimes when we come up against those powers in our own life, we're afraid to confront them because it might overpower us. What we learn as the more we look at the way Jesus handles the spirit world is that no, you begin to take power over it when you name it. And Satan may try and resist your efforts, but he cannot stand up against the power of God. And some people look at this and they say, well, I'm bothered by the fact that pigs got killed here. I want to tell you, Jesus did not kill the pigs. But I'm also going to tell you, there's a lot of scholars that debate this. There's no clear answer as to why it all went down like this. But understand, herds of pigs were unclean to the Jew. But if you remember the story of the prodigal son, he goes, he blows all of his money, and pretty soon gets to the point of what? Feeding what? Pigs. And did you know the Jews had a saying? What you feed pigs were carob pods. The carob trees. They're like this little, it's similar to a locust tree that we have in this area, but they actually had edible carob in them. But after you extracted the carob, the pods were kind of useless, so they would feed those to the pigs. They actually had some nutrient to them, though they tasted awful. And the Jews had a saying that when the Israelites are reduced to carob pods, then they will turn to God. In other words, we have a saying similar to that: when you get to the end of your rope. Or the good thing about the bottom of the barrel, there's only one way to look, up. And so here the prodigal son is feeding pigs. So they come into the area, and what do they find? They find pig herders. Perhaps pigs that are going to be used for sacrifice. But it was a nationalistic endeavor. This was something that they valued greatly in the Decapolis city of Hippus. Jesus came in and hit them square right between the eyes with the very thing that they valued most. I mean, this is like coming in and closing down a Chevrolet plant or closing down an apple pie factory in America. No, you don't mess with that. This is part of who we are. So I was bothered by, are we really that anti-bacon, Jesus? Come on. No, that's not the issue here. He gives permission. I believe that what happened was that there were a lot of people there who thought that they were in control of their lives. But when they saw the power of evil destroy their livelihood, Jesus was allowing them to see the power that they were dealing with. He allowed them to see the power of the demonic world. And those pigs, those demons didn't say, hey, can we go into the swine so we can run down the hill into the lake? They said, can we go into the swine? He gave them permission. They ran down the hill into the lake. Well, Matthew has this account of two demoniacs, and Luke does one. Is there a discrepancy? I think there's not a discrepancy. I think Mark just picks up. Remember, Mark's whole gospel is 16 chapters. Matthew is 28. Mark just gets stuff done. He doesn't have a lot of wasted words. I do believe there were two demoniacs, but I think only one of them came back to Jesus and said, I want to follow you. I think the other one went, oh, this is great. I'm set free. I'm going to go back to the lifestyle that I was living before. And that's the fascinating thing. Jesus said that many times in his stories. Not everybody who has been set free will return with thankfulness. I mean, think about the thief on the cross. One was repentant. The other, to his death, with the Son of God next to him, cursed God. Think about the lepers. Only one returns to say thanks. Time and time again, we have illustrations. I think this is a case where one of them decided to use the healing of God selfishly, and another used it selflessly. And Mark tells the story of the one who used it selflessly. He's saying, Lord, you've set me free. I therefore want to give my life to you completely. I want my life to count for something. I don't want to go back to the way it was, because now I see the power that it had over me. It was destroying me. And one just walks away. Only one wanted to follow Jesus. And Jesus says, no, you can't do that. I want you to go back. And I want you to proclaim what God has done for you. That word proclaim really means to preach. Forthtell. Not foretell, forthtell. He says, I want you to tell everybody that you know what has been done for you. Some of you recently watched the big debate between creationism and science. I don't believe that science is in conflict with faith. I think if we truly have faith and we believe that God is in charge of everything, that all science, when it's ultimately done right, will bring us right back to the feet of God. We ought not be scared of anything. But why am I saying that? We tend to divide. And then we try and find our intellectually smartest people to argue on our behalf, because we want to see the enemy go down. But as we begin to do things like that, we begin to think that we aren't capable of really defending the faith. Ravi Zacharias is one of my favorite apologists today. If I just listened to him all the time, I probably wouldn't stand up and preach. But I'm not Ravi. Jesus did not say, I want you to go throughout the Decapolis and convince everybody that Jesus is truly the Son of God. He didn't say that. He didn't say, I want you to go through the Decapolis and argue with all of the skeptics in the land and convince them that this is truly the right thing to do, that I am the way, the truth, and the life. He didn't say that. Jesus said, I want you to go back to your family and your friends and tell them what I did for you. You see, people can outwise us. They can out-argue us. They can outwit us. but no one can out-testify us. What God has done in our lives, no one can take away. You can say, this is who I was, but this is who I am. And no one can say to you, that's not true. No one can argue with your own transformation because you know the difference between the person you were before you met Jesus and the person you are now. Which means every one of us has a sermon. And the subject of the sermon is the power of the Lord. It's your story. And no one can or ever will take it away from you. That's all the man did. That's all he did. He went and he told his story. What I love, though, is if you jump over to Mark chapter 7 or compare it to Matthew chapter 4, verse 25, the next time Jesus comes back, the crowd is not asking him to leave, but the crowd is asking him to heal them too. The first evangelist to the Decapolis cities was a man filled with 100 demons, set free. He was not a theologian. He was not an ordained pastor. He was a crazy man who used to run naked, who'd been set free, and because people saw the difference in his life, they couldn't deny the truth. That the power of God changes lives. And so they came to meet Jesus on the shore. Crowds followed him. In Matthew's account of chapter 4, it says, crowds from the 10 cities followed him all the way through the Galilee. They crossed the other side. They came into the religious territory and followed Jesus. But I'm intrigued by the first time when they saw him, they asked him to leave. What is it that makes me want to ask Jesus to leave? Why would I ever ask Jesus to leave? What's intriguing to me is that, in fact, he does. He gets in the boat. What's the next sentence? And Jesus was getting into the boat. Jesus won't stay anywhere he's not invited. If you're afraid God will force himself on you, well, the good news is here he won't. If you ask him to leave, he'll get in his boat and go. So I started thinking about that. What is it? Why did they ask him to leave? Why would I want Jesus to leave? And it occurs to me that whenever his presence threatens something that I value, I don't want him around. He won't stay where he's not welcome. You go back and read the story of the woman at the well when he was in Samaria. After he just lays it out and she realizes who he is, she says, wait right here. And she goes and grabs all of her friends. And it turns out that Jesus stays in that area for 2 or 3 days. And it says that whole area believed. When people invite him to come, he comes. But when we say to Jesus, Jesus, you're messing with my life, the things that I value. Can you just come back later? He'll get in his boat. You see, the difference is our willingness to host him. Am I willing to host the Son of God? Am I willing to let him speak into my life? I'm either going to pray, Lord, come into my life and rearrange it as you see necessary, or come, but do it at the right time, and when I say so, but go away until I invite you. You see, the thing is, Jesus will confront our values. when they stand in the way of transformation. You would think that the people that came down to the shore would go, oh, wow, what are we going to do about these pigs? But man alive, look at the guy over here. He's been set free. The guy's crazy. Okay, Jesus, can you help us figure out what we're going to do with the absence of these pigs? Because we need to figure out a way to have a livelihood here. But man alive, this is really cool what you did for this demoniac. That's not what they said, though. You see, Jesus confronted their values, and when the demons ran into the pigs and the pigs ran into the water, they lost what was really important to them, a nationalistic importance. But it can happen to us. I've seen churches. I heard of a church that the youth pastor was doing a great job, and kids were coming like crazy, and the board members started getting concerned because they were wearing out the carpet. And eventually, they suggested that the youth group move down the street. And so they did. And they planted a church. And that church runs 15,000 people now. I don't know what happened to that church that has nice carpet. You're stepping on our values. We don't care about transformed lives. Whenever the past becomes more important to me than relating to new believers in the present. I can do that with music. Well, I want it the way it used to be. Well, would you recognize that the message remains the same, but methods change? I don't want methods to change. I like the way we used to do it. Do you see that it's transforming lives? I don't care that it's transforming. I just want things the way they used to be. That's a value that begins to stand in the way of transformation. I begin to think that the pursuit of happiness is not part of the American system. It's one of the 10 Commandments. It's not there. Or what I think that freedom in Christ means autonomy, getting to do whatever I feel like doing. Hey, I'm free in Christ. And generally what I'm going to end up doing are sins that bring me comfort, instead of relying on the Comforter, the Holy Spirit. Or somewhere along the line, I put together, and maybe I learned this from people that should have taught me otherwise, that I can have faith, but I don't really have to commit myself, or my time, or my talent, or my resources. I've somehow determined that there's Christians, and then there's really committed Christians. And I'm not going to be the really committed kind. I'm just going to be the Christians. That's a system that we've developed not from the Word, because you can't find it in the Word. That's kind of what bugs me about the Bible, is I can't find any loopholes. Jesus really wants me to follow him. And he really wants me to obey him. And sometimes he hits me square between the eyes with stuff that I really value. He's looking for people who truly love him and are willing to share what they've been given. And anything that gets in the way of that is really, for me, a pig. Jesus will mess with your pigs. Guaranteed. You think, well, this is really, really awkward, Pastor Jim. Can you please move on? Because people are going to leave the church. Probably true. The rich young ruler, when Jesus said, I know what the solution is here. You need to sell all you have and give it away to the poor. Come follow me. Oh, can't do that. He went away sad. You know what the next verse says? And Jesus ran after him and said, oh, come on, let's talk it over. No, it doesn't say that. Jesus went, wow, walk the other way. He confronts me. He tells me what it is. He will mess with my pigs. He will show me things that I value that are more important to me than transformed lives, even my own transformed life. And he's going to say, Jim, this is what it's all about. Is this what you want to be all about? Oh, yeah. He's been messing with my pigs ever since he landed on my shore. But I got to tell you, I'm a changed demoniac. And I may not be able to argue with the smartest ones in the room. But I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that I am not what I was. And I am not yet what I'm becoming. All because of the power of Christ. That's it. It doesn't get any simpler. And it doesn't get any more profound than that. What's the bottom line? Well, the bottom line is that Jesus would have never come over to that side of the lake if he didn't love the world. He didn't come over to kill pigs. Have we established that? He did not. It was the demons that did that. No big surprise there. Satan always destroys. He's come to kill, steal, and destroy. Let's make no mistake about it. God doesn't do that. Satan does that. He came to love. He came to the other side of the shore that everybody said, let's stay away from them because they're not like us. They're dangerous. Keep your kids away. Okay, how about we just go right into the middle of it all and let them know we love them. He pierces the darkness to rescue the lost. What we learn from the demoniac, the two, that some will use their freedom and their healing selfishly. The other man, Mark doesn't mention, probably because he wasn't worth mentioning. He got set free and walked right back into the culture. But this man was set free, and he used it selflessly. Because by the time Jesus got back, there was a crowd ready to hear the message. Jesus will mess with our pigs. He just will. But you know what's kind of cool? Hippus, this huge city on a hill. Archaeologists have gone in there, and they began to dig. And you'd think that they would find all kinds of evidence of this pagan city. And as they dig, what they're finding is all kinds of evidence that this pagan city on a hill became, by about the 3rd century, completely Christian. They've uncovered at least 5 Christian churches. That's kind of like one of those Paul Harvey moments right there. Now you know the rest of the story. It's amazing what Jesus can do through a bacon-loving demoniac. He wasn't a scholar. He was just someone who had truly been set free by the power of Christ. And the ripple effect of his life was changed lives. What's the ripple effect of my life? And when I think about that, I wonder, are there any pigs that need to be sacrificed? Do I need to just give Jesus permission Okay, Lord, you can mess with my pigs. Those things that I value, you can talk about them, you can deal with them. And you know what, Lord, I'll name them. Because I know you love me, and I know that you want to change my life, and I know you want to work through my life to touch other people's lives. So I'm willing.